Garden home here and garden home there. Join us for a full half hour of ideas that you can use in your garden home. During my years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore and create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home, a show about blurring the lines between inside and out. Now, it's definitely still winter. You can feel it today. But spring, well, it's not too far away, and there's plenty of evidence of this. Now, if you look behind me, you can see our environmentally friendly home is coming along very well. From here, it looks almost finished, but there's plenty of work to do, and we'll check in with the carpenters a little later. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about a couple of the other stories that we're going to see in today's show. This peaceful spot is the home of the House of Prayer, where my friend, the Reverend Susan Sims Smith, has built an interfaith haven set apart in nature. It's a place dedicated to contemplative prayer, meditation, and quiet, where all are welcome. And you won't believe it, some of the bluebirds have already started nesting. I went through last weekend and made sure that there was no debris inside the nest, thinking I was well ahead of the scouts. But I opened one of the boxes, there were actually a little bluebird in there on some eggs. Now what's interesting about bluebirds is that you need to space the nest boxes about 100 yards apart, and that's what we've done here. We have a dozen of them. And they love open territory like this. And I always use baffles on the poles. This keeps predators from climbing up the pole and getting into the nest box. And the nest box hole is very important. You want it small so that other birds can't get in there and push the bluebirds out. Now it's important to clean out the nest boxes. And I always try to get that done in late summer once the last crop of bluebirds have left the nest. Now, there's some other signs of spring going on out here. The red maples are showing a little color. And over there on Daffodil Hill, I actually saw a flower blooming. Come on, let me show you. Now, I know this field doesn't look like much right now. It looks fairly barren and forlorn and actually very cold, but this is a field of daffodils, and in just a few weeks it will be a solid drift of golden flowers. Pretty spectacular. You know what's wonderful about the daffodil is that it's a very brave flower. It starts to bloom quite early, and you can see here the first one to begin blooming in this entire field. It's come out a little too soon. You can see that the frost has knocked the petals back. You see, we planted all of these daffodils in the fall, and I saved this bulb to show you something very unique about it. If you split the bulb through the center like this, and you open it, you can see the tiny little flower here. All you have to do is plant it in the proper place and give it the right conditions, and in spring, that flower will emerge out of the bulb and produce a gorgeous bloom. Now, one of the things that I like about the daffodil, beyond the fact that it's just so tough, it's also deer resistant. Deer will not eat the foliage or the blooms of the daffodil. So that comes in handy when you live in a place like this where there's plenty of deer lurking in the woods just waiting to jump on whatever you plant. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind with daffodils, if you're having trouble with them not blooming, you need to make sure that you let the foliage die back naturally. These will come up, they'll flower, and I will let this foliage persist until it dies completely back, and only then will I mow off this field. You see, it's that foliage that recharges the bulb so you have a beautiful flower next year. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is daffodils actually prefer full sun. So if you have some planted in shade and they're not blooming, that's the reason why. When it comes to pets, I've always had what you might say unique taste. I tend to be drawn to, well, domestic animals like this beautiful goose. Out here at the Garden Home Retreat, we have lots of sheep, horses, a donkey, plenty of chickens and even some turkeys and peafowl. But the geese, ever since I was a kid, I always loved hatching goslings and keeping them around. Many of the animals we have out here are endangered or at least threatened. This variety of goose is one of them. This is a Sebastapol, and they come from the Adriatic region of Europe. And what I love about them is that they are snow white and they have a curly feather gene which causes their plumage to be, well, curly, almost like a feather pillow. And this gander has several consorts, and they love to be on the pond. We have a pond with about 6 or 7 of these. They look like floating feather pillows on the water. Now, geese are very easy to keep if you have a lot of space. They're virtually disease resistant. The geese will start laying here in about another month, and they'll produce probably a dozen or so goslings each. And as you may know, geese are known to be great watchdogs, the best watchdogs of the barnyard, in fact. So if someone comes up that they don't know, well, they sound the alarm. There you go, boy. Good boy. See, what did I tell you? Well, we've made a lot of progress out here the last few weeks. I'm getting pretty excited about it. When you start putting paint on things, you know you're getting close. And that's what's going on here on the porch. Getting final coat of paint on the columns. As you can see with the ceiling, we have the boards in place and we're trialing a couple of colors. I love that bird egg blue. Now, in the landscape itself, we've had a lot going on as well. Now, on the east side, we finally got that holly hedge planted, which will define the lawn space. And in preparation for the lawn itself, we've been piling up lots of good topsoil and blending in compost in it. We also poured the foundation for the well house, which is very important because we've got a well that produces 60 gallons a minute that comes out of here. We want to make sure it's protected. As you can tell out here on the porch, we really have quite a wind that blows across here. In the summer, the breeze is going to be nice, but out here today, it's a little cool. Now, what they're doing is they're using a unistrut system to strengthen what will be an entire wall of shutters across here. And what they're going to do is wrap this, gives it additional strength. They're going to wrap this with Spanish cedar, which is very sustainable. This Spanish cedar will last a long time. So all of this metal will be completely covered, and then the shutters will be hung on piano hinges here. So depending on the weather and the conditions, we'll be able to open and close these shutters, which will give this porch much more of a room-like feel. You know, after all, it's about blurring the lines between inside and out. I don't know if you're like me or not, but when I have a childhood memory or think back to something that really made me happy, I want to repeat it. I guess it just comes with maturing. My aunt and uncle, by their dairy barn, had an old apple tree. It was a bunkum apple, which comes from the 19th century. And my aunt would pick those apples every fall and peel them and dry them. And throughout the entire winter, she would make the most delicious fried pies. And as a matter of fact, she still does. And she took budwood off of that very bunkum tree and grafted some apple trees for me for the orchard here. And what I've done now is created an orchard of heritage variety apples. If you think about it, you go to the grocery store these days, you see Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, Gala, maybe Braeburns, certainly Fuji's, of course Granny Smith, maybe a couple other varieties, and that's it. Now, in the 19th century and even before, there were hundreds of apple varieties to choose from, each having its own delicious, unique flavor. Now, what I'm doing here is creating a small heritage apple orchard so I can enjoy some of those flavors of the past and at the same time preserve the important budwood or the genetics of these trees for future generations. Now, what I love about these apple trees is that in the orchard we're mixing them up with crab apples. They're ornamentals, they produce a tiny fruit, but what I love about them is the profusion of bloom that you see in the spring with a crab apple. So out here I've mixed some ornamentals along with some of these old fruit-bearing varieties. Now what we have here is a little crabapple, one of my favorites. This one's called Narragansett. And you can see the winter fruit is still hanging on it, and some of the birds have really enjoyed it. And the buds are beginning to swell, and what I like to do this time of year is come in here and clean out lots of these little tiny twigs that you see coming off the trunk like that. I don't take out any major limbs. I just try to kind of clean it up, as you can see here, just snipping off little limbs that are about the size of a pencil or under. The other thing we do is we put dormant oil on them to try to suffocate any insects and keep any fungal problems down. And if you look down here, you may say, what is this funny looking thing? Well, these are tree bags that we use around the base of any young tree we plant. And we can keep water in there, we can put vitamins and nutrients, and it will slowly leak out around the base of the tree and feeding those roots. And I will tell you, given the droughts we've had the last couple of years, it was only because of these bags we were able to keep the orchard alive through the heat of summer, and it's doing very well now. Now, I want to say this about these trees. I don't let anything go to waste. All of these twigs that I'm cutting off, we'll bundle them together, and I love to cook chicken over fruit wood. The flavor is excellent. So the twigs get used in the kitchen for cooking, and of course these glorious apples are eaten fresh and also dried just like Aunt Jenny. I don't know if I can ever come up to making fried pies like she can. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed having this little greenhouse. It's the perfect place for me to spend some time on those cold days. Now, you see in here, I have a lot of my house plants and a lot of the plants that I use for interest in the garden during the growing season. I've got interesting grasses, palms. Just look at this Euphorbia diamond frost in full bloom. It loves it in here. I even have impatiens in bloom. And look at my little fruit tree over here. This is a Myers lemon, and I was just soaking it down with an insecticidal soap to keep the mealybugs off of it. Now, one thing I did this year that I am really excited about, back in the fall, I actually planted some tomatoes. Who likes those tomatoes that you get in the store this time of year? They taste like cardboard. But let me tell you, these little gems are so delicious. They taste like they came out of the summer garden. Now, what's interesting is that I planted these from seed, and in 70 days they started producing fruit, okay? I've been collecting tomatoes off of these now for about 2 months. You can see the plants are getting a little spent, but I'm telling you, I'm so impressed. This variety is called Balcony Red. It's called Balcony Red because the plants tend to hang over and cascade. You see I have it in a wire basket here. Now, there's also a Balcony Yellow. I just planted in a little 1-gallon pot, again, just to experiment, but just look at all of this gorgeous fruit. So they're very generous with the tomatoes they produce. Now, what's interesting about these, you can't just plant any tomato. You couldn't just put a Brandywine in here and expect this kind of production. These have been bred to not require as much light. So they don't have to have a grow light in here for them to produce this sort of yield. Now, the only problem that I've had with them is a touch of scale that's just come on. There are little white insects that attach themselves to the stems and leaves. And so I use an organic spray and just soak them down really good like this to get rid of it. And the reason I use an organic spray is because I'm eating the tomato, so I want something that's very safe. Now, some of the other things that I'm growing here include this Dynasty red cabbage. Isn't that gorgeous? A cool weather crop that I will plant out in the garden probably in the next week or so. Experimenting here with some beets. Just look at that gorgeous color. And then some other cool weather flowers such as violas. So lots going on here that soon will go out into the garden. But I have to tell you, those tomatoes have been so good, and they're going to finish up just about the time it's time to set out plants in the garden. So I'll have tomatoes year-round. Hi, this is my design studio where we take pictures you send to me, and we look at what all the possibilities might be with regard to changing the landscape. Now here we have the Mitchell's house in Arkansas, really a handsome house. So why don't we start with the colors that we see here. I can see the shutters are showing a little wear and could use some paint. So one thought would be to echo these shutters, or the color of the shutters, with the shingle color. So I would go with a really nice dark tone, like take the shutter color right here, make it a little darker than the trim color, and do the shutters in that sort of color family, because they're fading to almost a purplish color here. The other thing that I would do is maybe think about painting this fence over here the same color, so you get this monochromatic color scheme going on with the house. Now, a few things that I would correct. You see you've got some dark purple leaf plants here. They look like loropetalum. They could be barberry, I'm not really sure. And then you've got this chartreuse going along as well. And those colors I don't think really resonate that well with the brick. I would go with one or the other. In this case, I would definitely lean toward this purple leaf plant because it works so well with the brick color. And I would do away with all of these chartreuse plants. They look like they might be one of the maybe lime mound spireas, one of the chartreuse colored spireas. Now the other thing is I'd get rid of this shrub, or at least move it so it doesn't block this window. So those are some changes that I would make immediately. Now let's talk about some improvements we could do with the planting and creating a more inviting entry to this beautiful house. Now what I'd like to do is think about framing the house first, and one of my favorite plants to use is a river birch. And what I'd like for you to explore is the idea of making a large bed here, let it come across the front and sweep around like this. I can't really tell what's going on this end, but think about some multi-trunk river birch, maybe 2 plants here that would grow up. I love the bark of river birch, and I think that the exfoliating bark of the birch will go well with the color scheme of the house. And I would do the same thing down here on this end, planting 2 river birch like that, which would really frame the house beautifully. Then I would come in and underplant it across here with a low growing azalea, and then break it up a little bit with another grouping that would come around underneath the river birch. And then a ground cover just coming up to the walk, leaving some pockets for color. Bring the ground cover like that. We'd use this for seasonal color, a pocket here, a pocket under here, and then maybe even a pocket of it right here. And then you could accent that color with a large container here, a large container here, and then maybe one in this corner like that. And why not put a bench right there? And then under this, let's go back to our shrubs for just a moment. I would fill this entire bed with dwarf gardenias. They do very well in zone 8, so you won't have any problems with those. And it looks like you've got a crepe myrtle growing here. I like that plant. I think it's a little large for the amount of space you have from here to here. It's okay to leave it. You'll want to leg it up really high and make sure the canopy comes up like this, and the same way with this one, where it comes up like that. So just beware, they're going to get quite large. I don't know what color those are. It looks like they may be sort of a hot pink. You might think about switching to white to sort of cool the whole composition down. This will be gorgeous in the summer. Hope these ideas are helpful to you, and good luck with your project. I enjoy pausing to reflect on the natural beauty of the Garden Home Retreat. Sunsets out here are amazing, and just walking the grounds and listening to the sounds of wildlife and the wind through the trees puts me at ease. When my friend the Reverend Susan Sims Smith approached me about a project she was working on called the House of Prayer, I knew the feeling she was trying to achieve in the garden spaces surrounding this interfaith haven. A hallmark of this space is silence, but we'll break that rule for now and let Susan lead us on a tour of the gardens and the areas designated for prayer and meditation.
Oftentimes you can't count on silence, and this is a place that people can go and count on silence and solitude. So somebody's had a very busy day and they want some quiet time. You can't go into a sanctuary and count on silence. So the purpose of this building is a place that's sacred and it's set apart just for people to be quiet. They might say their prayers, they might do meditation. There's also a little tiny library where there'll be books on prayer and meditation that they might read in that room. But the largest space in there is for meditation and quiet. And the way the 4 rooms are arranged is to go on a spiritual journey from the busyness of outside life into the interior life for quiet, renewal, and restoration. And it's designed to do that not only for Christian people, but for people of all faiths and possibly for people who have no faith. People seem very excited about it. First of all, they're intrigued by the idea of a place of silence. And also the architecture of the building, people are really responding to. It's unusual on the outside, it's unusual on the inside. Architecturally, it's fascinating. And it's not just unusual, it is unusual in a way that takes people into quiet and into peace and into beauty. It's that the form of the building follows the function of the building. The intention of the building is sacred silence, and the structure of it takes somebody there, helps them move toward silence. So in the Christian tradition, there are 2 kinds of prayer. One prayer is you're talking to God, thanking God out loud. The other type of prayer is a receptive prayer called contemplative prayer. And there are many different techniques for quietening the mind so that you can be still and listen. So we wanted to create something that would work for people in the city and have it for their day use. So part of the idea of where to place the building was to nestle it away from the road, a little bit hidden from view, and then to protect it with some beautiful screening. Another way the building relates to nature is that in the round meditation room, there is a dome up above, and there's a round circle of earth. And we think of God as the creator of the heavens and the earth. We're fully human and fully spiritual, or we are seeking to be fully human and fully spiritual. And in that meditation room, you see that paradox that we live on the earth, but we're connected to the divine. So that room mirrors not only a theological viewpoint, but mirrors nature. I love to look at the outside of it. I love to look at the inside. I'm thrilled. It is more beautiful than I thought it was going to be.
The House of Prayer is such a beautiful idea. You know, we need time for meditation and tranquility, and what a gorgeous facility for it. Now, I'm going to get to work here and get some of these seedlings potted up to move out into the garden a little later. It's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at plansmith.com.